Most people think soldiers carried this to shave. They're completely wrong. This small piece of glass, roughly the size of your hand, could outshine a 20 million candlepower searchlight. Think about that for a second. Military searchlights, the massive truck-mounted kind that swept the night sky over London during the Blitz. This pocket-sized object matched them. Why would the US military mass-produce a mirror as frontline combat survival equipment? Why not a radio, a flare gun, a whistle? What made this so critical that by 1944 it was being packed into nearly every pilot's emergency raft kit across the entire Pacific Theatre? And here's what I'll show you at the end. A documented case of a signal spotted from 105 miles away, a distance that should have been physically impossible, and why understanding how that happened completely changes the way you see this object. Welcome to WW2 Objects. Every object tells a story. To understand why this mirror existed, you need to understand the specific nightmare that US aircrews faced over the Pacific Ocean starting in 1942. Picture this. You're a US Army Air Forces pilot. Your aircraft has taken catastrophic damage. Engine dead, controls gone. You manage to ditch into the Pacific. You survive the impact. You pull yourself into your one-man rubber raft, soaking wet, probably injured, and you look up at the sky. You are completely invisible. No engine noise marking your position. No smoke trail. And no radio. The crash destroyed it, or it's waterlogged and useless. Just a tiny yellow raft bobbing in thousands of square miles of open ocean. Rescue aircraft could be flying search patterns directly overhead and still miss you entirely. From altitude, a one-man raft is virtually indistinguishable from the chop of the waves below. Here's what made this even more brutal. In 1942, the standard US one-man ANR-2A raft, the very raft pilots relied on for open ocean survival, carried a repair kit, a bailing bucket, 2 paddles, a concertina pump, 2 bullet hole plugs, a sea anchor, a can of drinking water, a seat pad, and 2 hand paddles. That was the complete inventory. No food, no signalling equipment of any kind. Read that list again. You survived being shot down. You survived a water landing. You're alive against the odds. And the military sent you out there with no way to signal for help. That gap between survival and rescue was killing men who had done everything right. Here's the first payoff. Engineers didn't solve this problem with electronics. They didn't solve it with chemistry. They solved it with something that had been sitting in physics textbooks for centuries: sunlight. In September 1943, the US Army Air Forces officially adopted the ESM-1, the Emergency Signaling Mirror, version 1, under specification 40653. Manufactured by General Electric at their plant in Warren, Ohio, the ESM-1 looked almost identical to a bathroom hand mirror. Glass face, black painted reverse, a braided cotton lanyard threaded through a corner hole so you could wear it around your neck without losing it in rough water. But one feature separated it from every shaving mirror ever made: a precision cross-aperture sighting hole punched directly through the center of the glass. That hole is not decoration. That hole is the entire point. Here's the question you need to sit with going into the next section. If sunlight reflects off any mirror, why does a tiny hole change everything? Why couldn't a soldier just use any piece of reflective glass? The answer reveals one of the most elegant pieces of engineering in the entire war. Here's what most people don't realize about reflected sunlight. Aimed correctly, it doesn't just shine, it fires. A typical ESM-1, used correctly, produced a beam of light equivalent to a 20 million candle-power searchlight. Sit with that number for a moment. Not a flashlight, not a flare, a searchlight. The kind that could sweep across an entire city skyline and be seen from aircraft miles above. That output from a piece of glass weighing just over 2 ounces. But here's the catch. Raw reflection is useless without aim. Think of it like a lighthouse. A lighthouse doesn't generate more light than a simple candle by burning brighter. It uses a precisely shaped Fresnel lens to concentrate and direct that light into a single narrow beam visible for miles across open water. Ships don't just see the lighthouse glowing, they see a specific directional signal they can navigate toward. The ESM-1 operated on the same physical principle, except you were the lighthouse, floating in a raft, and every search aircraft within line of sight was your ship coming in. An ordinary mirror, your shaving mirror, your pocket compact, scatters reflected sunlight in a wide, unfocused cone. You'd be bouncing light in a general direction with no way to confirm where your beam was actually pointing. From a rescue aircraft's perspective, that random scatter might appear as nothing more than sun glint off a wave. The cross-aperture sighting hole solved this completely. Here's how it worked in practice. You'd hold the ESM-1 out at arm's length and tilt the glass to catch direct sunlight. A small bright spot, the aim indicator, appeared on your opposite hand or on a surface nearby. That spot told you exactly where your reflected beam was travelling. You'd then bring the mirror up close to your eye, look through the sighting hole, and physically walk that bright aim indicator onto your target. The distant aircraft, the ship on the horizon, in the rescue helicopter. When the indicator aligned with the target through the aperture, your 20 million candle power beam was hitting it directly. The documented sources describe it as requiring two hands and real coordination, something like a juggling act between tracking the aim indicator on the back surface and keeping the target in sight through the hole simultaneously. It wasn't instant, it took practice. But once you had it, you had a weapon-grade signalling device that required no batteries, no fuel, no electronics, and couldn't be destroyed by saltwater immersion. Now here's where the numbers get extraordinary. Surface-to-surface signalling, raft to ship for example, was physically limited by the curvature of the Earth to roughly 6 to 10 miles, depending on the heights involved. That's still remarkable for a 2-ounce piece of glass, but it gets better. Surface-to-air signalling, raft to aircraft at altitude, opened the geometry up dramatically. A 3 by 5 inch signal mirror operating surface-to-air had a documented effective range of 20 miles under clear conditions. And then there's the account that sits at the outer edge of what seems physically possible. A sea survivor in the Pacific. Identity unrecorded in available secondary sources. Cited by researcher Malcolm G. Murray in Civil Air Patrol News in May 2000. Produced a mirror signal that was seen by a passing pilot at a distance of 105 miles. 105 miles from a piece of glass, floating in the Pacific Ocean. Picture the moment that pilot sees an inexplicable flash far below and banks to investigate. The survivor in that raft, exhausted, and dehydrated, probably days into their ordeal, watches the aircraft turn, watches it descend. That flash of reflected sunlight is the difference between going home and disappearing entirely. By mid-1944, the US military had recognized the ESM-1's value so clearly that it made a formal decision. Signaling mirrors were added to the standard survival inventory of nearly every pilot emergency kit. The ANR-2A raft, the same design that launched in 1942 with no signalling capability whatsoever, was updated to include distress signal flares, a sponge, a signalling mirror, and a desalting kit. In 2 years, the military had gone from sending pilots into the Pacific with no means of signalling whatsoever to equipping them with one of the most effective distress tools ever devised. But here's the thing. Most history books miss entirely. The ESM-1 wasn't just for fighter pilots, and that brings us to the detail I promised at the start. The one that changes how you see this object completely. The ESM-1 under specification 40653 was issued not just to US Army Air Force's air crews. It was issued to merchant seamen running supply convoys through torpedo-infested Atlantic and Pacific waters. It was issued to OSS personnel, Office of Strategic Services, the Wartime Intelligence Agency, deployed across Asia and the Pacific. It crossed every branch, every theatre, every category of American service. Here's the human evidence for that, preserved in the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. 2 ESM/1 signal mirrors sit in their collection today, and one belonged to Waldemar Semenoff, a marine engineer whose career aboard American merchant vessels spanned 54 years. He survived a wartime torpedoing. His mirror, Model 40653, made by General Electric, went into the Smithsonian collection as evidence of merchant marine equipment. The second mirror tells an even more unexpected story. It belonged to Julia Child. Before she was America's most beloved cooking personality, Julia Child, then Julia McWilliams, served as an OSS officer from 1944 to 1945. Her duties took her to India, to Ceylon, which is modern-day Sri Lanka, and to China. Standard OSS issue for personnel operating in those theatres included the GE Model 40653 emergency signalling mirror, specification 40653, compact enough to carry in a field kit, light enough to forget you had it, and capable, if you ever needed it, is of producing a beam visible for miles across open terrain or open water. After the war, Julia Child kept that mirror, not displayed, not stored in a box. She kept it in her kitchen junk drawer as a reminder of her service. That specific mirror, Smithsonian accession number 2001.0253.0236, Hyantsi, is verifiable today. Now think about what that detail reveals. The ESM/1 wasn't a specialised aviator's gadget. It was trusted by intelligence officers operating behind enemy lines in Asian jungles. It was trusted by merchant sailors crossing oceans in ships that submarines were actively hunting. It was trusted by anyone the United States sent into a world where being found alive was never guaranteed, and it weighed just over 2 ounces. Here's the engineering truth that the entire history of this object keeps circling back to. The most effective survival tool of the Pacific War wasn't a radio. It wasn't a flare gun. It was a piece of glass with a hole in it, manufactured by General Electric in Warren, Ohio, that could equal the output of a military searchlight using nothing but sunlight. No batteries to corrode in salt water, no fuel to run out, no moving parts to jam or break. Just physics, a clear sky, and the discipline to aim correctly. The soldiers and sailors who carried it understood what it represented. In a world where electronic communications failed, where flares burned out, where radios drowned, sunlight kept working. It always kept working. So when you see one of these, that small rectangle of glass, black on one side, with a hole drilled through the centre, you'll understand exactly what you're looking at. It's not a shaving mirror. It's a precision instrument engineered to match a 20 million candlepower searchlight. It's a lifeline that crossed every branch of American service, carried by fighter pilots, merchant sailors, and OSS intelligence officers from the Atlantic to the jungles of Asia. It's proof that in the right hands, the most powerful technology isn't always the most complicated. Sometimes it's just sunlight, aimed correctly, reaching 105 miles across an empty ocean towards someone who needs to come home. Thank you for watching WW2 Objects. If you have suggestions, from survival equipment to field rations to weapons engineering, drop them in the comments and we'll give you a shout out. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a story from the battlefield.